Start an agency, they said. It's gonna be easy. Make $100,000 a month. You and your boys just spin out 60K websites for law firms. After that, Lamborghini is imminent. That's what the gurus told us. I think all of us know that agencies aren't actually that simple. But this is an amazing time for creatives of any type to either think about how they can use agency work to help them build a portfolio and understand more than working brand side, or build creatives together and say, hey, we have a long-term vision of building something interesting that helps solve modern problems that these larger agencies can't. So in this video, we're actually going to visit our friends at Darkroom, who run a 85-person agency here in the city with kind of global talent that does all kinds of really interesting work. We're gonna highlight some smaller agencies that we really enjoy, and I'll talk a bit about my experience actually working inside of a web design agency as the creative in residence. As our European correspondent, our hipster correspondent, Clayton is deep in touch with all the people that are working on, like Dill Scone branding on fixed gear bicycle websites. Like, he's got that locked in. What are some great examples of some of the smaller firms that you have a lot of respect for?
Some of the great hallmarks of agency work are the agencies that are going deeper within a specific niche first and foremost, rather than casting a wide net. Darkroom is a great example of that. Some of the great agencies that I appreciate and respect right now is All Right Studio, based in Brooklyn, for the work that they did on their Marquez Brownlee Adams collab, which is a footwear brand also based in Brooklyn, to Mouthwash Studio, which is
legendary,
known well and is legendary, based out in LA, for the work they've done with Nike and Tom Brown.
And this is a great era, if you do have an agency, to be able to say, hey, even if we're smaller, we can bat above our weight class. We can grab some of these big campaigns. I think large brands are looking more and more for interesting new creative talent to try and work with. And we're gonna explore a little bit about that, talk a little bit about how you actually structure an agency, what the operations look like day to day, what the challenges are for founders who are gonna be working with outsourced partners, and it's gonna be a fun ride. Talk to me a bit about Darkroom, what it is, how it started, and what you do.
I am the CEO and co-founder at Darkroom. I started the company with one of my really good friends, Jackson Corey. He's our chief creative officer, but basically, where we started, totally different than where we're at now. But the thesis when we started the agency was creative is the biggest lever that brands are gonna have today to drive profitable growth. And that's gonna be kind of the foundation of good performance marketing, which isn't really a novel concept. We just saw a rift in the market in terms of how it was getting executed. So we went deep on that. Where we're out today now is we're a leading omni-channel growth marketing agency for mid-market consumer brands. So we work with many of the fastest growing brands in the consumer space, and we work with them on a suite of marketing execution services that spans direct consumer marketing, from email and retention to paid acquisition, to marketplaces like Amazon and Walmart, and then the actual retail channels. The way I like to think about the agency is we are consulting with brands, and we're basically like the strategic economist, CMO, that's deciding where brands should be investing their money in different media channels to get the most performance.
And so it's for some context as to why I wanted to talk to you about a bit of this, is like your group does like really tasteful work. It does like really things that the creative stands out. It's like got a creative first angle, and that's whether you do work on Amazon, you do work on like meta paid channels, work on retention with email, retail ad network stuff, like across the board, it is like interesting creative work. So as you've scaled up, and I'd be curious to know like how big the agency has gotten now, like how have you kind of kept that as a through line through what you've done?
So the agency, we're 85 people right now. We're across the globe, mainly in New York City, Sao Paulo, Portugal. It's a great business. We're growing at a really fast pace. Basically, like every single market that we've like tried to tackle, every single service, we've just been like, we're gonna show up as the most tasteful option. Like, we're gonna be the most creative player in that space when we compare with other performance marketing agencies. That's been a really big accelerant to us, because performance agencies, they care about the data and the numbers and the digits, and like they totally hollow out the fun, beautiful part of advertising. So that's been strategic for us. And frankly, like when we've engineered services, we've been like, the performance, the data side, you can hire for that, you can get that. The taste stuff is the intangible. That's been our go-to-market strategy. It's why we've been able to enter Amazon. Amazon agencies are very technical, and we've been able to grow and win.
So with all this, like all these clients running across like 85 plus people now, what sort of systems are in place that like allow y'all to operate and scale creative at this level?
We deliver tens of thousands of assets on a monthly basis for our clients. It's a lot. We have like the pipes, and by the way, this is all being done remote. That's been a challenge for us. We've been around for 7 years now, so it's like we've learned, and it's been trial by fire. Operational infrastructure is super crucial. We leverage Notion, we leverage Figma, We leverage Frame. You know our tech stack at this point, but it's the usual suspects, and it's just the way those things are operationalized. Templatize the things that you can templatize, make it super easy for people to get what they need. And then, most of the teams that we have like at least 5 marketers working on one account with the client. So you need to make sure the client conforms to your standard. With our working relationship, it was easy. Like, you're a Notion guy, like, so.
And some context on that, like, so the briefing process, I do a lot of assets for my valuables brand with Darkroom as the people that create that. They do really interesting work, but it's like a brief process, right? Where you're putting in exactly the network that it's going to, what the creative looks like, what the creative brief is for it, the references, like the links to everything. So it's all in one place. You can see all the work, all the links, all the drafts. You can kind of go back and forth between all the assets that are happening. If I go need hey, now I need this in a 9x16, it's like easy to go and like assign that and make that work, which is great because I am like a Notion person and have thought a lot through that. But obviously, like, I'm doing maybe 100 assets a month, whereas some of these brands now are getting to thousands of assets a month, and it's a different world.
When you have all these channels, it's like, okay, we have our clients, they're deploying maybe 50 net new emails a month, and then they have, 150 ad statics and videos, and then you have Amazon assets, and then you have retail assets. So it starts to layer on top, then you have organic social. So I think you just need process for that. The thing is, like, briefing is like a full-time job. So that's like the next step for us. It's like, we currently now, when we run all these different programs, we have many different resources briefing. It's like, how do you unify that? So the thing I'm thinking about is like, how can we leverage automation? How can we leverage AI to be able to do that in a way that's tasteful? Because I think that's been the missing link. And it's why people like you are really able to excel, and they kind of go in there and they can be dangerous with a Notion.
One thing we talked about a bit earlier today before we had this combo was just this idea of how much briefing like actually has to happen. Because really right now we're in this role where like the creative strategist is now in charge of like, cool, I am briefing for all these emails that need to go out. I'm briefing for the campaigns that are getting shot. I'm briefing for the social assets, the ad assets, the campaign assets, and they're across all these different networks. And then we need variations of all of this. And then we need ideas that like created as a through line. How are you seeing, brands or anyone like approach this like creative scale issue?
We have the service like strictly for creative strategy to kind of unify these things, because frankly, brands don't do it well. I mean, there are some companies that do it really well, and you take note and you're like, damn, these guys are dialed. And those are the references we use, right?
What is a good, good brands that really stand out that you're working with? What are they doing different than the pack?
I think they're really investing in their creative resourcing. It all comes down to resourcing for me. Like, who is on your team? Like, do you have the right roles? Startups, they come into resourcing issues, which is why I feel like founders need to step up and actually become the creative director, which we've talked about. And then there are brands that are super over-resourced. They just don't have the right people in the right places. And for me, that's inexcusable. So I think it comes down to resourcing.
Yeah, and a quick note on that, where we're talking about the founder getting involved, is that if you we view a lot of content, or a lot of brands now, the founder or someone on the key team needs to be making content. They need to be involved in that process, whether it's just they're making UGC ads, whether they're telling the brand story. And a big connection point of that is then you can actually brief or know what makes a good piece of content, or like hop in on something when it's not there. Last question I'll ask you, and then we'll pop over to a few questions kind of Clayton has, is your team as an agency has been making a lot of content to promote the agency as well, and in a lot of different ways, from short form video stuff like what I make, to like more traditional LinkedIn stuff, to vlogs and podcasts, and like we're going to be at Shopify here in a minute doing a live event. What does that strategy look like? Like how is that organized? How have you kind of integrated that into the workflow to help grow your agency?
We were talking about this earlier. Like, I think if you're in a B2B space and you're in a space that doesn't market like a traditional consumer brand, which is what we're used to, you have a huge opportunity to leverage social channels, which everyone is on, even the decision makers, like, that are going to buy your products or services in the B2B space. So I basically am looking at Darkroom as if it's a consumer brand. I want to be like very premium. It's how we approach growth marketing. It's what people kind of feel when they go to our website. So I've treated things like it's like a layer cake. It's like the bottom of the layer is like, as an agency, it's like your collateral, like how you show up in decks and RFPs, your website. And then there are layers on top of that. Then it's like Instagram, and then it's like email, and then it's like, what is your event strategy? What is your video strategy? What does LinkedIn look like? And those, for us, we're trying to be really intentional about it. We're trying to be super tasteful. But I mean, at the end of the day, it's what everyone's been saying. Treat your marketing organization like a media team. Focus on the resourcing. Make sure you're leveraging references, and you kind of know, you have an idea of what you want to.
And is LinkedIn like the primary growth channel you're looking at?
LinkedIn, YouTube, IG. I mean, our IG, we grew 100% like in the last 12 months. It's not like huge numbers right now.
But it makes it different. People don't understand, like, hey, it doesn't, if it's not 100,000 followers, that's fine if you're getting.
Yeah, but now I'm like, I see where this gets to like 60,000 followers, and 70,000 followers. It's momentum, right? Yeah. I know right now we're producing good content, and like the things are starting to work together. And that was a long process of trial and error. But yeah, feels good.
So I want to talk about this idea of founders being the creative directors of their own brands. And that's not something we've typically seen in the past, but it's something you push really heavy on with a lot of your clients and just in your general marketing. I'm curious, like, where did that idea come from for you, and why do you think it's so impactful and powerful?
Yeah, I think it came through experience. Mind you, working with those type of people sucks. It's the worst thing ever. But I mean, like,
shocker.
just through like the type of clients that we attract at the agency, it's like high taste level. You know, brand is usually like a moat in some sort of way. It's an asset for them.
Yeah.
And so you have founders who are super involved in all of the content that's being created. And so they have final say on everything. You know, they have golden votes, they have involvement in everything. So it can get discouraging, like, because you have things that just don't see the light of the day. But ultimately that's that individual's call, because they're trying to curate, you know, an image and a vibe, and you know, they have a marketing vision.
One of the interesting things when you think about this idea of like brand versus performance is that, I'm sure earlier on in the business, and even in my experience working with consumer brands over the years, performance was always divorced from brand itself or creative content, right? Like you had the ads that you pushed through Meta that were just like cranking and working, and the algorithm was more predictable. And now it's like they've just merged into the same thing, right? Your creative and the performance behind it are almost like married together.
Same thing. I think performance marketers that were not creative leverage the advent of social media to hollow out the creative. They were like, no, this is performing, leveraging just like the most uninspiring creative, that they were like, no, this is like my sandbox, my niche, like creatives, you won't understand the data. And that was like not the right move. And now we're realizing, like, as these platforms have saturated, that like you actually need to show up in the right way on these channels. So I'm like very much, I was telling Oren this, like I'm of the opinion that the creative muscle is actually one of the most important to build up. And I think this is why designers are super effective in the organization today, is because they just like get exposure to how good creative and good taste can be leveraged within the marketing domain. Performance, you can learn, like SEO, I can learn. What is return on ad spend, ROI? I mean, I can learn that. Those are concepts that, like, you know, they're not that complicated.
Yeah.
There's some higher level things that take time, like pro forma P&Ls, like on the marketing side. But like I actively start to teach our team, like our creatives, about those things. My marketing team on the Darkroom side, it's all designers, like, and I've just started to upskill them so they can understand different things.
Speaking of the creativity side of things, working in marketing is weird because it feels like creative work has become so convoluted at this point, and it's really difficult to constantly churn out such a high amount of creative assets across different channels and have different needs for each channel at a high velocity and pace. I'm just curious, like on a personal level, how do you think about each channel and the way that you need to produce the right assets, knowing also that you have different clients with different needs?
Oren and I were talking about this earlier today, like quality versus volume. I think at a certain scale, like when you're spending a certain amount of money, like on Meta, for instance, like I have a lot of discussions with our clients when we've like done really well on like level 1. It's like, hey, we need to 10x our output here. It's like a crawl, walk, run type thing. Optimize for quality at first and the workflow, and like make sure that you have like good throughput, and then you start to scale. And scale can be a function of like adding more resourcing, adding more capacity. What I'm looking into right now is like, how do we leverage a lot of the Gen AI tools, like that's coming, I see in like design and video. But yeah, I mean, I think quantity of asset is a function of like how much you're spending, how much you're communicating, how many channels you are on.
So let's talk about trends and tactics if you have an agency or you're trying to scale it, and working through what this kind of modern work environment looks like. So one thing that you'll find in common for a lot of the agencies that we've talked about here is that they have a global presence, right? They have designers that are working from Europe, they have people in Latin America. They're really bringing this global culture, often very remote, into what they're doing as a group. So how do you be creative and how do you sync culture inside an environment like that? And so one thing I've noticed is you actually have to create a culture and be intentional about it. Are we a culture that shares ideas, that shares experiences? You know, do we try to understand the other people on the team, and how? And then you integrate that, whether that's inside your Slack and using that, or whether it's inside the meeting structures that you have, or doing offsites where everyone gets together. You'll notice the strongest remote teams are investing some of the money they save by being more remote into actually having some of these in real life experiences together. But then also equally, there's a design culture, an asset organization culture, a culture of sharing and ideation. What are those? Slack channels, meetings, group chats, moments where people are workshopping together, creating Cosmos or Pinterest boards together, putting their assets into place and having comments or styles or ways that they categorize it. You need to embrace the design thinking aspects of this and the themes that the people on your team like and resonate with, and help build it into how you create a visual identity that kind of replicates in a more online way the working presence of more traditional agencies who could all do that in a room. And the next idea I want to highlight is brandable methods. So at Van Group, we have this branded term, brand conversion design, where we talk about how you can make landing pages and websites that convert that are still on brand. It doesn't have to be this like stripped down, super performance driven theme that we've had for kind of years leading up till this last few year period. But the idea of creating a term, of saying, hey, we have a process, we have an idea, our brand represents, that we repeat it, we use it with clients, we use it on our website, we explain it as a concept, a proprietary method like a Gartner Magic Quadrant or like a Huberman protocol. Some of these ideas that are repeatable are important to help distinguish your agency from others by saying, hey, we have a particular method. And it's one of those things that over the first few months, no one notices, may not make a difference. A year or two in, if you keep using it, you'll see it adopted. And then you may end up 5 years or 10 years down the line with something that really becomes ingrained in terms of how people talk about the whole world of the services that you provide. And one of the biggest things that I think every agency needs to think about is sharing content. So when we talked to Darkroom earlier, Jackson and Lucas from Darkroom both share content in different ways. At Van Group, they work with myself and with Clayton and I together to release content about what the agency is doing in addition to their own content. They're looking at, we need to be sharing this process, sharing our work, and doing it not in a traditional portfolio or submit to an award show, but participating truly inside this culture of creation that is happening on the internet now as an agency. And that happens on LinkedIn, that happens on Instagram, that happens with alternative voices as well. The idea of, if I'm an agency, I should be tapped into culture. I should be tapped into how things move. That's part of what brands pay for, is to be an interface there. So tap in with up and coming creators, right? Not every agency can come and say, hey, we want to work with the largest marketing creators. But if you find the small folks, the people who are telling stories at the right period of time and embrace them in your journey, even from the beginning by just working on some brand deals, having them debut announcements, having them help form your strategy. Community-driven content with people that are outside of just your agency group is what I feel like the future of that marketing looks like, and can help you take advantage of untraditional methods versus competing in the same styles and sizes that large agencies have an innate advantage on. And I cannot recommend highly enough embracing LinkedIn for this. Obviously a network that many of us find cringe in a number of ways, but is a #1 driver for almost every agency I talk to in terms of how they're generating business, by not just telling their own story, but explaining and breaking down other things happening in their niche or industry, and being super active and engaged as a team in promoting the vision of the agency forward. So anyway, a really interesting topic for us to dive into. Obviously a world that we spend a lot of time in. We have a number of other videos in this series that Clayton from Spreza and myself and our work together as Hyper have put together and put out there. So if you want to dive in on marketing, art direction, social strategy, and more, you can see the other videos in this series. And a big thanks to Air, who powers a bunch of the companies we've talked to here in terms of how they organize their assets and find them, for putting this entire series together. Thank you so much for watching.